Visionaries, and here to talk about the benefits of building voice skills in a Position Zero world is Geoff, head of Microsoft Advertising Brand Studios. Please give a big warm applause.
Hello, OMR. Hello, LinkedIn Live. Wave. The first thing that we hear in life is our mother's voice. We get really excited also when we pick up the phone, which is a rarity in this day and age, and hear that friend of ours on the other end who we haven't spoken to in a while. And I don't know about you, but I get really excited when I go to the opera and a diva hits the high notes. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive today on the power of voice. We know that we're already there in the next wave of computing, but how do we take advantage of this? So we're going to go through a deep dive here, 5 different things that we can take a look at. One being sort of the state of voice, where we are currently. We did a research paper at Microsoft, actually called the 2019 Voice Report. Voice Design 101, some of the things that we want to think about when we think of conversational experience design. The types of skills that are available. And yes, you can't see the Echo Dot up here, but we have it on Alexa up here, which some of you might say, wait a minute, you work for Microsoft, why are you using an Amazon product? We'll get to that when we get to some of the demo. And CED platforms in action. There's a number of new platforms now that don't require you to understand code. Machine learning has actually made it easier for all of us to create voice design. This is important because we're already at a place in the world where very much like Weebly or Wix or Squarespace allow us to create a web platform without a coding background or a developer background, we now have the ability to create voice design without a developer's background. And then finally, we'll do a demo at the end. We'll show some interesting skills, the different types that we can utilize. So our state of voice in 2019, how are people using it? It's always interesting because I don't necessarily agree with all the thought leaders out there that you should build things just for the sake of building them. That's not good design. Good design is about building things that actually help people or create solutions for people. So right now we know that most people are engaging with a digital assistant. You might have a number of digital assistants that you use. Maybe you use Siri because you are on iOS or you use an iPhone. Maybe you use Google because you're using Android. Maybe you also use Alexa because you have a smart speaker in your home. And maybe you use Cortana because it's on your Windows 10 laptop. So there's a number of different assistants that we're using. There's not necessarily one dominant one. The other thing when we get to the demo eventually is that many theorists think that ultimately there will not be one dominant voice platform, that all of us will have our own voice AI or IA, intelligent assistant, one that we actually will code for ourselves, that will have its own voice. So we'll actually take a look at that. Voice skills, the big one up here too in terms of 52%. Our actions through a home speaker. We know this is a big one. We're using a lot of these skills now for very simple information. What's the weather? What do I have to do today? What's on my calendar? Can you play this music? In terms of where we are on the state of voice on the larger aspects, searching for quick facts is the dominant area right now. And we know this because if you are in an environment where you don't want to use a screen, it's very easy to ask that question and get that answer. The second area is interesting one. It's asking for directions, which makes sense if you are both driving or on foot. In a crowded city, it's much easier to actually ask directions of an assistant. One of the things I would love you to pay attention to are some of the areas on the niche, and that is accessing banking or personal financial information. Even though the state of that is only at 11%, the banking industry is using this in ways that are very forward-thinking. One of the things that's very interesting is the fact that you can now check your bank account without ever having to take out a mobile app or a mobile screen. Banks know this. They know that people want to use this in different scenarios. Definitely an area to watch, even though it's at a lower percentage rate. So let's go through some voice design 101, because it's important to understand sort of the fundamentals of how to build some of these skills and also how to interpret them. Again, not everything should be built into a voice skill. Doesn't necessarily make sense for everything that is out there. Well, let's take some of these points into factor. We want to build if using voice is easier or a more natural way to interact. I know I have 2 daughters, and every time I'm trying to rush out of my room in the morning to get them to school, it's much easier for me to ask questions than have to look at a screen. That interaction is very important. Also, when users' hands are busy. Now, the example might be you're cooking, but we also have to think about accessibility here. There are a number of people who do not have the use of their limbs, and that's very important in terms of allowing them to have computing power as well. Using your voice in a more efficient experience. We know this from basically being able to talk to smart TVs now instead of having to navigate these terribly designed interfaces to try to find what to watch next. Also for multitasking. Now we're starting to see in some organizations, instead of having to book a conference room using a calendar, you can basically ask an assistant to do that, an intelligent assistant to do that. And then, of course, when a user is driving, walking, or otherwise distracted. Questions to keep in mind. Again, as design thinkers, which we all are, we should be asking more questions than we necessarily have answers for. Like, will the design solve the user's problem with a minimum number of steps? If it adds too many, voice is probably not the best interface for that particular solution. Will the design solve the user's problem better, faster, or more easily than an alternative experience? Is it intuitive? Can you use default values when the user is not specific? And then finally, a great user experience doesn't require a lot of talking. I think one of the things with designing voice skills is there's still a tendency of having to put too much language there. How do we actually make it very simple and very conversational by design so it's easy to use? It's almost pleasant to use. Now, a little bit of background in terms of some of the language around voice design. We know that there are 3 things when we are designing skills we have to have an understanding of. Again, this is important not from a developer's aspect, but really from the conversational experience. Utterances are inputs from the user that your app needs to interpret. This is basically the question that you're going to ask. And a lot of times we don't think about what those questions are. So this goes back to thinking about how would someone ask this question? What slang would they use? How does it differ by language? Intents are the actions that the user then wants to perform. And finally, entities are the data required to perform that action. So if I were to give an example, an utterance would be me saying, "Hey, Cortana, tell my travel agent I want to fly to New York at 6 p.m. on Friday." The intelligent assistant would understand that and use a skill called my travel agent, and then pass that utterance to the app, which then figures out the intent to book that flight to New York 6 p.m. on Friday. That's the actual entity. So there's 3 simple building blocks to all voice skills. Full intent, partial intent, and no intent is an important thing for us to understand when it comes to that part of a skill. Full intent is actually saying the full question that you have. Hey, Cortana, ask Mileage Wizard if I have enough miles to travel. That's the full question. The intelligent assistant would understand that and answer, you currently have 30,000 miles. This is enough to book a trip. Do you want me to book a trip? A partial utterance, or sorry, a partial intent is something that we have a tendency of forgetting about, because not everyone is going to ask the perfect question. We're humans. We're illogical at times. We're also very rushed. So we have to think about partial intents, which would be, hey, Cortana, ask Mileage Wizard if I have miles. And Mileage Wizard would say, do you mean miles that you can use for travel? And then no intent is a person not asking the question that the intelligent assistant would understand at all and having to reinterpret that. This is actually based on psychology. If you think about someone saying, hey, Cortana, ask Mileage Wizard. The problem with that is there's no intent there at all. Mileage Wizard doesn't know what to do. The intelligent assistant doesn't know what to do. So you must come with that response, basically, that says, oh, do you want available miles, used miles, or discounts? You have to give that information back to the person so they then can give the proper utterance. So there are a number of skills that are out there. There's actually 7 different types. And of course, this is not a list that is finite by any means, because this is still an emerging area. We have what's known as custom interaction models. These are custom skills that many companies, as well as many, what I would say, bedroom or garage developers are building. Things that they feel people need for their voice services, and thus they're creating them. There's actually one that I was talking to my friend from Gimlet Media about that helps your kids brush their teeth. So if you actually ask that skill to work, it'll give 2 minutes of a time frame where your kids can brush their teeth. That's a good example of a custom skill, something that can be used that is individual by design. We also, of course, have smart home skills. How do we tap into the Internet of Things? This is being used, of course, if you want to dim the lights, you want your speaker or audio system to work, you want your car to start before you go out for the day. The third one are flash briefing skills. This is actually really interesting because flash briefing skills is pretty much your 2-minute daily summary of what might be going on in the world. And this is a huge one because it's actually built on technology from 20 years ago known as the RSS feed. It's funny to watch how technology is cyclical in the world. We'll show you a couple examples of that. This is actually massive with almost every media company. One of the biggest flash briefing skills in the US right now is the New York Daily. That is a 2-minute flash briefing. The Guardian in the UK also has one as well. We have video skills that are tying into basically APIs now and some of the platforms that are out there. Music skills, list skills. You basically can ask your assistant what you want to buy at the grocery store and have that available on your mobile when you go there to actually purchase. And then cross-platform skills, which is very interesting because we're moving into a world now where assistants can actually talk to one another. Cortana and Alexa can actually engage with one another. This is important in terms of how to share information that might be on different systems together, so you're not having to use one dominant platform. So this is having a huge effect also on search. We can't not pay attention to that in terms of where things are going. If we think about zero position, what's happening is if you are less likely to use a mobile ecosystem to search for something and you're using voice to do that, what is that position zero answer that you get? And again, we should have that ethical discussion on all of this. is that necessarily good for the world if there is only one finite answer? So these are things, again, I think developers, as well as those who are studying the humanities and social sciences, have to figure out. Because when you think about it, your assistant is giving you one answer rather than a number of different conclusions. So there's a couple of conversational experience development platforms that are out there. Chatbot.ai. There used to be one called Storyline. If you're really interested in sort of getting started at the beginning in terms of how to design one, I actually recommend one called VoiceFlow. They're based out of Canada. And the reason why this is important is because, again, if you have no coding background, that should not prevent you from building a skill. The way that VoiceFlow works is it has blocks of intents and utterances that you actually piece together to figure out how to actually create actions. This is probably the number one way many people are building custom skills now. We also have to think about the fact that many skills are already tied into APIs that are existent within those platforms. So if you're thinking of a music skill on terms of what music to play, most of that is already dominated by most of the music players. So you have to think about what are the other things that you can create beyond giving you music to stream. Now let's have some fun. All right, so there's a couple different things that we're going to ask Alexa, Cortana, and Google Assistant. Let's see if we can get some answers from it.
You had Cortana enabled. Do you want to open it?
All right, so flash briefing skill. One of the things we actually
You had Cortana enabled. Do you want to open it?
One of the things I would actually suggest doing is thinking, if you build a skill, how that actually moves to other platforms. So a good place to start would be Alexa. It's a dominant platform. And then how do you get that over to Google Assistant? How do you put that on Cortana? How do you figure out how that actually gets onto other areas? So a good example here in terms of the utterance, they're different for all three. And this is where there's still a lot of discussion on, hey, how do you make this better? But with Alexa, what you would basically do is you would enable what that skill name is. So you would say, Alexa, enable Insights with Microsoft.
Insights with Microsoft is in your flash briefing. To hear it, just say, "What's my flash briefing?" To manage it, go to your Alexa app, tap on Settings, then select Flash Briefing.
All right, so once you have that, then basically every day you can wake up and just say, Alexa, what's my flash briefing?
Here's your news. Insights with Microsoft is here with your daily intelligence.
The business world is noisy. Insights with Microsoft helps you become a better business decision maker by acting as your information broker. Today's insight.
Alexa,
Customer.
stop. Okay, so the utterance is going to be different than on Cortana. This is where it can be a little difficult in terms of the user because they have to understand exactly what to say. And when you're promoting a skill, you actually have to tell the people you want to use it what that utterance is going to be. So for Cortana, it's going to be, hey, Cortana, ask Insights with Microsoft for my daily flash briefing.
Insights with Microsoft helps you become a better business decision.
And then finally, if we go to Google now on Assistant, they have a different utterance, and that's going to be, okay, Google, talk to Insights with Microsoft.
Sure, getting the test version of Insights with Microsoft.
The business world is noisy.
All right.
Insights with Microsoft helps
So it took a little bit of time to come down from the cloud. One of the things to note for all of these, too, unfortunately, is you have to host each skill within each individual cloud ecosystem. So if you have a flash briefing on Amazon, that must be in AWS. On Cortana, it has to be in Azure. In Google, it has to be on Google Cloud. Really difficult, I think, in terms of how to push developers to do all three, but that's where we are now in terms of hosting those different types of briefings. Now, let's look at a custom interaction skill. This is one I built a while ago as a demo, has different things that we'll utilize. Alexa, open Bing ads.
I couldn't find any enabled video skills. Go to the Alexa app to find and enable video skills and devices.
That may be a problem there. Hold on a second. Let's go to the next one. I'll fix that. This one's an example of a cross-platform. So again, one of the things to note is how are intelligent assistants talking to other intelligent assistants? Because you obviously are using different types of software. And in the world we're going in, it's going to be much more frictionless if we're able to have those systems navigate one another. So what we have now in terms of the connection between Alexa and Cortana is the ability to actually have some of those experiences. So let's use this as an example just to sort of show that cross-platform integration. Alexa, open Cortana.
Cortana here. How can I help?
Hey, Cortana, check my calendar.
All right. You don't have anything scheduled for today. How can I help?
All right, so a good example of this, too, is if you're using Office, you can sync your calendar.
I can't help out with that one.
You can also send
How
email
else can I
that way
help?
by basically just asking Cortana to do that while still having an Alexa device. Vice versa, you can also ask Cortana to open Alexa and perform other functions. This is important if you're on a laptop, let's say, and you only have Cortana, but you want to get to the skills that basically you've enabled on Alexa. Again, good things to think as a conversational experience designer. How are you more open sourced in terms of those conversations? Finally, I did a little bit of a demo here in terms of the future of advertising. Now, when I do this demo, don't pay too much attention to the voice agents that I'm using for commands. In the near future, it's highly unlikely we'll be asking Alexa, Cortana, or Google for anything if we design our own intelligent assistant. This includes giving that intelligent assistant its own voice. A man, a woman, or possibly genderless, which is very important. So let's take a look at listen to this example. Alexa, open Microsoft Advertising.
Cortana here. How can I help?
Play music from Khalid.
Before playing music from Khalid, would you like to listen to a podcast called The Business of Hype? The Business of Hype highlights streetwear, creatives, and entrepreneurs from various corners of youth culture.
Sure.
Playing the podcast The Business of Hype from Spotify.
How does that happen? How do you go from intern to president?
When I became an intern, I made a commitment to be the best me as an intern.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I had to be the president of interns.
Okay.
Nobody could out-intern me.
Mm-hmm.
I have electrical engineering makeup. So when you ask me to dissect the market or put a plan together, my shit looked like, 5 pages, graphs, and charts.
Yeah.
When the other guys...
It's a Post-it note.
They said, well,
Thanks for listening to that podcast. What can I do for you now?
Cortana, exit.
We hope you enjoyed the Microsoft advertising demo. We want to give a voice to every person and organization on the planet to achieve more.
So what's happening here is actually we're using a combination of artificial intelligence based on my search results to curate interesting things beyond music. I wanted to listen to Khalid, but they suggested a podcast that might be interesting based on some of the other things that I search for. This goes back to, again, some of the points made here at the festival that marketing isn't necessarily about advertising, but about curation, something that it has always been doing. And it's interesting how we can bring this to life with different voice agents at our disposal. Again, we shouldn't look at this as the end of this journey, but the beginning. Feel free to reach out to me. Let's talk. My name's Geoffrey Colon. I work for Microsoft. Thanks again, OMR.
Very interesting. Thank you very much.